make our way to Wednesday night gaming. Yes, this has become a weekly tradition now, and you can't break tradition, or tradition will break you. Someone has a very loud car, obnoxiously loud, I would say. Anyway, it's quite possible that today, because it is a very windy day today, you may not hear me very well. If that ends up being the case, then we will call it early, and that will be that. But we'll see how we get on. We will see how we get on. It's also, as well as being windy, it's very nice and bright. Feels like spring has finally sprung. We are finally leaving the doldrums of winter behind us, and we can start focusing on nicer things, nicer weather, nicer opportunities that come with bright days like this. Such as going for pleasant walks, role-playing outside, board gaming outside, not in this wind. I remember once I was part of a gaming club, and we used to run games in a scout hall where Boy Scouts would be, not on the night we were playing. And it would get so hot in the summer, because there was no ventilation, that we would always move our tables and things outside into the car park and end up playing out in the open. So, yeah, I remember Wayne's World style, because it was an active car park, that we would have to move all of our things rapidly if there was a flurry of cars arriving. It wasn't the most convenient of locations, admittedly, but I've got fond memories of the place. Rapture Music and Gaming starts off the AMA with a question. Which game am I heading to today? Well, very good question. It's going to be one of two. I'm going to be running either way. I'm either going to be running Cold War Cthulhu tonight, continuing with that campaign, set in Istanbul, 1971. There is currently a nationalist revolution, a coup, taking place in the city, which has basically disabled the cult that the investigators are investigating from exiting the city. You would think that a coup would provide cover, but as suspicious characters are being rounded up and shot or arrested right now, it has basically paralyzed them and given our characters working for various Western governmental agencies, intelligence agencies, a chance to get closer to them. But there is this backdrop of things like executions, imprisonments, and so on. I mean, who would imagine something like that in Turkey? So there's that, and the other possibility is the world below. We have been playing that. We've been kind of alternating on these Wednesday nights, and the world below, I'm very much enjoying my campaign of that. The players are as well, I hasten to add, where they are exploring, well, a new world, an island that they discovered in the sea off of Oriasis. They sailed there and they found an island filled with mammals and plant life, which is pretty uncommon in the world below, and have been investigating it. They ended up discovering the portal through which these beasts and the flora was emerging, and now have to make the decision, because they don't know what's on the other side of it, whether they're going to destroy it, because it's a big chaos risk, and settle this place, because chaos storms will soon emerge, or whether they're going to allow it to remain open. It's a nice, it's funny, both games are kind of dealing with a sort of nuclear weapon-like event. Obviously in Cold War Cthulhu, it's the Cold War, and there's a nuclear arms race on, along with various suspect experimental weapons the cult of Yig is involved in. And in the world below, that's represented by portals to other worlds. They present great opportunity, like any sort of scientific innovation, but may also herald the destruction of the characters and everything they hold dear. DS Clava says, no questions, but I'm going to attempt to multitask like our multitasker. Good for you. Good for you. You know, the first time I ever heard the word multi-tool was playing the video game Deus Ex. Do you remember Deus Ex? First person on the PC. I'm sure you do. It was a classic at the time. And yeah, I loved that game. First time I ever used a multi-tool. I loved the fact that you could play through it in different ways. It was so different to so many other FPSs. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved Half-Life, which was around the same era, and Thief too. But Deus Ex felt like the first one that really gave you a choice on whether you were going to take the stealth route, the all guns blazing route, the diplomacy route. And I think a lot of that was an illusion. Often you'd be left with the same conclusion whichever way you went. But I don't mind an illusion in a game. I don't mind it feeling like your choices, as long as your choices feel like they matter, it doesn't really matter if they do or not. James Tobias Stewart says, arriving midstream, still on time. Yes, you are. I mean, I'm doing this an hour later than usual. Our game is starting an hour later than usual, so we might attract some different people to the AMA today. And again, I apologise for the winds today. I can't really do anything about them, but it is a very windy day, and that may sometimes obscure some of what I'm saying. So, Osman Ehsan says, Bob Mortimer, PA. I don't think I really look like Bob Mortimer. I certainly don't sound like Bob Mortimer. I think he's from Middlesbrough, and that's quite a distance from where I am. Common J says Deus Ex predicted a lot of things. It did. It was a trendsetter for gaming, but also dealt with some very typical subjects, conspiracy subjects like Illuminati and whatnot. It had a very good take on, I guess, cyberware. It was riding that cyberpunk wave a little. It did it very, very well. So, yes, Deus Ex, can't remember, was Deus Ex Human Revolution the second game, I think, Victoria? Nima Mohammedian says, hi, it's first time to see you. What's up? Where are you from? Feels a bit like a botty question to me, like when Michael Jackson dropped into this stream and asked us to buy his records. But what's up? I'm on my way to run a game. Where are you from? Britain, specifically the south. I'm soft and southern, though I've moved all over the place in the course of my life. I've lived in various places, and where I am right now is my favourite. Mr. B. Malarkey asks, technocracy or traditions? Oh, it's got to be traditions. The technocracy, while of course they have various exciting options, are by their philosophy quite limiting. Not limited, it's one of those situations where if you buy into the system, the world is your oyster. But if you don't, you're more or less the enemy and you need to be suppressed. I don't really get on with that kind of police state style thinking. Okay, so what else have we got here? James Tobias Stewart says, well, isn't that a lot of RPGs, especially pre-written ones? You can change something, but the key details will remain the same. Yeah, certainly, that is the case with a lot of published RPG adventures. If you think of, well, and video games, of course, but I remember the most common criticism of things like the Transylvania Chronicles and the Giovanni Chronicles was it didn't really matter what your characters did. The outcome was pretty much set in stone. It was like in Giovanni Chronicles 1, no matter what you do, Cappadocius is going to get diablerized. So why have a fight scene at the end? And I can kind of get that, but I think it's not strictly the fault of storytellers with no imagination. But whenever you're looking at a published RPG, you do need to, I think, consider how your players might test the limits on the page and be able to improvise new outcomes. You shouldn't always force them back to what's written. That's just dull. Let's see. Secret War was the second. Human Revolution was the third. Thank you, James. Bharath is from India. Hello, Bharath. And Nima is from Tehran, Iran. What you think? I've never been to Tehran. I wanted to go to Persepolis. Not that, well, in fact, I was about to say not that long ago. It's probably about 20 years ago now. I did a lot more traveling when I was younger, had less responsibility, fewer responsibilities back then. I was all set to go to Israel at one point, to Jerusalem, and then some bombs went off and I was in danger of losing my deposit. So the travel agent, back when you used travel agents, encouraged me to cancel while I still could. So I did. Rapture, music and gaming. Have you delved into the Alien RPG yet? If so, can you speak on it? Yeah, I have. I've played the Alien RPG. I've ran the Alien RPG. I've got a bunch of the books. So, yeah, that always bodes well, doesn't it? If I start with a so. The first thing about the Alien RPG by Free League is it is absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful, and you will find that is the case with every single Free League game. They are not shy about using blank space to emphasize a point. What do I mean by that? Well, if I have a page in my role-playing game that is pitch black and there's just a small quote in the center of it, that is striking. Not every company has the liberty to do that with their RPGs, because if you do it several times, that's valuable real estate and you are spending a lot of money. But, you know, there's the argument that it's worthwhile. So artistically, the Alien RPG is fantastic. And in fact, the content within it is fantastic. There's plenty of material that you can use to run your games, play your games, especially with all the various expansion books. However, I do still feel that despite the Colonial Marines set, which is really good, that the volume of content provided is almost unnecessary for the nature of the game. That isn't to say it's not worthwhile. I think playing Alien can be a great moody experience, and I ran a 3-session arc of it, which went really well, so it doesn't have to be a one-shot where everyone just dies. But I will say that it is tailored to a certain style of play that doesn't necessarily reward campaigns quite as well as it does one-shots, convention games, specials, you know? That's not a bad thing, me saying that. I just think that it's always tricky, and you get the same thing with Nazis. I'll get to why in a sec. Xenomorphs are not terribly interesting, which means you don't have an antagonist you can interact with. Not really. You can't speak to them. But you can obviously have androids, you can have corporates from Weyland-Yutani and so on, who you can interact with them. So there's plenty of opportunity for roleplay. But when you get to the tense bits, the combat bits, you are very much man versus dice at that point. And I think that can be limiting to some GMs. There are ways around it, sure. If you've got a good GM who can describe situations, ratchet up the suspense. But if you don't, you are at risk of basically, just playing a numbers game at that point, which can fall unsatisfying. So I really like it. I know that doesn't sound like it, but I really like Alien. I think the game is fantastic. You just, like all games, need the right group, the right GM, someone confident enough to tell the story well and bounce off of your ideas. And I would say almost more importantly than that, most importantly, you need players who are prepared for their characters to die. Because some players don't like that. Some players are really against their characters dying. They don't enjoy it. It ruins the evening for them. That's not to say you can't run Alien for those people, but you should have the discussion beforehand. I really don't want my character to die. Okay, we'll engineer it so that they don't. But if you leave it to chance and they die and then they're not satisfied, it can lead to a really down mood. So there we go, long answer. Lucas Alves says, when you're making NPCs, you build them or just an idea and sort of roll with it? Depends on the game. I never fully stat NPCs. Actually, that's not true. There are a couple of NPCs for games, real recurring ones, that I fully stat. But I think of it like this. Let's take World of Darkness, for example. There's a whole section of abilities that you're never going to use for an NPC. Now, that's not to say that doesn't inform the way you play them. Some people need to see that skeleton of dots, skill points and such, to inform how they're going to portray them. But that's not something I need. I just don't find it useful. So knowing how many dots a character has in theology, in Dark Ages Vampire, for example, or computer in Vampire the Requiem, doesn't help. It just becomes a wasteful exercise at that point. So my NPCs tend to be about a sentence or two, followed by a few bullet points. Motivations, fears, things they like, things they dislike. Again, apologies for the wind, I'm on top of a hill. Not my wind, the wind out there. And then everything else just comes through play. I might indicate what their attitude, their starting attitude is going to be, but that's about it. Farseer says, I really like the World Below RPG, thank you! And I'm going through it. It might be too early to ask, but do you plan to make more Dawns and Callings in the future? Yeah, quite simply. In the Ed Greenwood's Monstrous Ecology book, which will be coming out relatively soon, and again I apologise for the stiffness of the breeze that's interfering with the microphone, I am no doubt. You have several new ancestries, settlements and communities, dogmas. So yeah, there's lots of new Dawns and theses to go with them. And I can well imagine that if we get to do some kind of player's guide in future, which I hope, we'll be able to put more syntheses, dialectics and syntheses, and maybe a calling or two, and some more sorceries in there. So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Farseer. If you haven't left a review or rating on DriveThruRPG.com, please do so. I would really love that rating number to get up to 30, because every single review, every single rating convinces another person to buy the game. Also, if you're watching this video right now for the algorithm, give it a like. We're only on 3 right now, and I can't believe most of you lack thumbs. So what else do we have here? Nima is apparently a game developer using Unity. Can they show me their game? No. Not because I'm not interested, but I don't really review video games on this channel. I've done it once or twice, but it's not the focus, if there is one. I just don't really have the time or the inclination to pick up new games for the sake of reviewing them. It's rare enough that I play video games. When I do, I tend to play them to death. Right now I'm doing that with Project Zomboid. Really enjoying Project Zomboid, playing it with a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine. And that's something I should probably get the rest of my Discord server to start playing, so we can do some massive survival horror scenarios. Yeah, that could actually be quite fun. I think it's in the sale right now, in fact. So yeah, Project Zomboid, that's a good game. Let's see. James Tobias Stewart, isn't that true of some of the end times plot lines, like the inexplicably infinite army of Nafandi? Yes. I mean, almost all of them. The Gehenna, Apocalypse, Time of Judgment scenarios have limited outcomes. By their nature, I mean, they're ending the game. They can't account for absolutely everything. But again, what you need to be aiming for is to have a storyteller who can tell the story that caters to the players. Just use what's in the book as a template. Don't follow it verbatim. Otherwise, everyone's going to end up disappointed and bored. Keegan says, Free League is one of the best out there. A lot of their games feel like they're meant to be played around a real table versus a VTT. I completely agree. I think Blade Runner, if you can get past everyone's playing an outcast hunting cop, well, potentially not. And Alien really stand out. Vaesen as well, fantastic game. Let's see. DJ Kehoe says, how did Do Not Adjust Your Set come about? You work for Onyx Path and it was an ex-Stasis Games book. I work for lots of companies. I don't work for Onyx Path. I'm a freelancer. I just do a lot of work for Onyx Path. So that's why I do games for ex-Stasis, Dirty Vortex, a couple of smaller companies. Chaosium, Green Ronin, Helmgast, who do Cult Divinity Lost, various board game companies like Flyos Games, video games companies like Nacon and Big Bad Wolf. I will work for pretty much any company, providing they're not a trash fire, because you have to. When you're self-employed, when you're a freelancer, you can't simply depend on one company to pay your bills. That would be very short-sighted. And there are lots of writers who do, and I understand why. It can be very easy to fall into a rut or not be confident enough to approach other companies. But after you've got a few credits under your belt, you should really start fielding yourself to companies, even ones whose games you don't know. The way I've managed to stay employed and do this as a full-time job is, quite frankly, by always being open to learn new games and interested in learning new games, and then going to a company I've not worked for before and saying, hey, I've worked on this, or I've ran this, really enjoyed it. I'm a writer for these companies. If you ever have any writing work that you need doing, I would be more than happy to throw my hat in the ring, or words to that effect. And usually it results in my getting hired. So I tend to think that there are three core aspects to game writing, getting hired in game writing repeatedly. Reliability is the first one and the main one. It's less about quality, which is the second point, but reliability is what's going to keep them coming back to you. You need to be able to hit a deadline. If you can't hit a deadline, why would they hire you? Now, it's fine to miss deadlines occasionally. Everyone has reasons for doing so, but you really need to strive to not, because it's usually a two-stage process. You'll have a writer and you'll have a developer, and you may even have an editor, so that'll be 3 stages. If your work isn't spectacular, that's a shame, but it is for the developer to make it work and for the editor to make it shine. So that's why quality is second on the list. But, you know, I would like to think that I'm a pretty good writer as well. Richard asks, as a developer, what do I look for in new writers? Exactly what I was just talking about, the ability to hit deadlines. Quality of work is good as well. The willingness to learn is the third aspect, and that encompasses system and setting. I have very little use for people, and this sounds harsh, I know, who can only do one thing or the other. Games are not fiction, but nor are they maths textbooks. You need to make your systems colourful, and that means you need to understand the systems for the games you're writing, but you also need to understand the setting. So understanding, or the ability or willingness to learn the setting, is vital. It's why it's not really an industry you used to kind of get into casually. You have to really be interested in it in the first place, and some people dip their toe in and think, nah, there was a lot of work for not much money. And that's true, you do have a lot of work for not much money, but you can very easily, I think, organise yourself to start almost a churn of work. If you can get used to the routine of, okay, I've got this assignment, that means reading this, it means running this to learn it. That is, let's say, 6 hours of work. Okay, you've done your research, that's at a minimum. Now you can get onto the writing. Running or playing is vital. You know what they say, there's visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners. Most role players, in my experience, and board gamers, are kinesthetic learners. It's why we can read a rules manual, but it means nothing until we put it into practice. It's the same for learning a new game. Your best bet is to fumble through it, make a few mistakes, run it the first time, then you'll learn how to do it. Otherwise, you're just trying to go off memory. Alright. Rapture Music and Gaming says it's 40k season in my gaming group. What's your army? I've never played 40k. Never, ever, ever. Never played Warhammer in any miniatures sense. I played Warhammer Fantasy, the RPG. I got recently done with playing the Enemy Within campaign over on Red Moon Roleplaying. I think it's 121 episodes of that. So if you want a long marathon, but I think we're the only people who have ever done it all the way from beginning to end in an actual play, so there's that to recommend you. But so yeah, I would have no idea. I'll say Chaos just to be edgy. Iconoclast says, what's a genre or game style you'd make if you didn't have to worry about audience size or chance of funding? Or put better, what are some of your dream projects? My dream project is something that I worked on briefly and then had to stop due to the illegal invasion of Ukraine by the imperialist Russian bastards. I was working on an indie game, small game, honestly, very reminiscent, I suppose, of this war of mine in style. It was very personal to me because of something that my family were caught up in a long, long time ago, naturally, because it's the Holodomor, which is the forced famine of Ukraine and other countries, Kazakhstan as well, was majorly hit by Soviet Russia in the late 1920s and early 1930s, forced collectivization. Now, all this might be utterly dull to you, but the idea was you would play the inhabitants of a village starting about 1929 and going all the way through to about 1934, and have various events and challenges and NPCs and so on, and some of it would be political, some of it would just be about pure survival, and it would be grim and it would be miserable, but it was so well researched. It's something I've been interested in for a very long time. I've always had a strong interest in Soviet history because of my family's links. And yeah, I had to put it aside, and that was my choice. No one else made me do it. I just realized that if I released it, I would be seen to be capitalizing on current events, and I didn't want to be doing that. I didn't want to release it and be accused of exploiting a real-world tragedy that's going on right now. I wanted it to be sort of semi-educational more than entertainment. And yeah, I don't think that would have worked. I don't think it will work while this war is going on, so we'll have to see. RVCM, would you ever work on a new Monera book? Yeah, if I was approached, if I was offered. Nima is making an online football game with no AI. Well, I'm not a massive football fan, although I did talk about it in the last of these live videos. Some average man says, my friend was excited to receive The World Below as a birthday gift. Do you have a rough estimate when the book will go to print? It is already on its way to print, so it really depends on how quickly printers print it and distribute it. And no, I don't have a rough estimate. It will usually take a few months, but I'm hesitant to even give a rough estimate because of the state of the world in terms of trade, tariffs, and so on. So it will be released, I just don't know at what point exactly. Right, 2 more questions then. Richard, you write and run a lot of horror RPGs. Is there anything in fiction that can still scare you? Yeah, there is. I have various... There are various things that I don't put in games as a general rule, or I don't enjoy reading about. Most of the time it takes me by surprise if I feel uncomfortable reading something or nauseous. I'm not going to go into what because it's personal. But yeah, there are some things, and again, they are personal. It is things relating to my past or things I've lived through that I will read them and think, oh, I can't carry on with this now. It may not be what you expect. All right. So what else have we got here? Common J says, I made a spy game, but the premise is they are stationed in airports. Is that possible to run a game like that? I'd probably need more context on that, Common J, if they're stationed in airports, but I don't see why not. If they're restricted to airports, then you just have to come up with lots of plots, subterfuge, intrigue that takes place in the airport. So, and thank you very much, Barrel Soup Chef, for saying that you loved Chicago by Night, and the sacrifice, the adventure in that is something I contributed to. I'm not the only writer on it. But it is I do think it's one of the best vampire scenarios that was written. I'm very glad to have had a directorial hand in that and made the amendments I did. But yeah, not purely my idea. I mostly just peppered it with lots of the shorter parts of the scenario, I guess, flavor bits or character bits. The main gist, my direction was it needs to be something that incorporates the La Sombra into Chicago. So I gave the direction, and then I started adding characters from Chicago by Night at key points, like the point where you've got 3 obstacles, 3 characters you might encounter in different ways and things like that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, John Burke. Thinking. Yeah, I see you, John Burke. Yeah, coming into my chat at the end of the evening. All I gotta say to you is this. First name Matthew, last name Dawkins. Yeah. You're looking at me right now. Yeah. Just as I'm about to drive the elbow from the top rope into your Scottish head. Yeah. And I know that because it's a Scottish head, it's a fat head. That's right. Miss Elizabeth wouldn't look twice at your Scottish head. Dig it.
And that is my macho man for the night, because I don't want to kill my voice before running my game this evening. And I will have to save my advice on portraying Mithras, some average man, because I need to get going. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Buy the world below and leave reviews and ratings. It is incumbent upon you to do so. Bye-bye.